Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this is Diego with the beautiful Karina, my lovely prometida. And we're waiting for our K1 visa to get adjudicated at the Service Center in California, US of A. And we got our NOA1 letter, well, it's a receipt date, April 18th, 2022. And now we are in March 2023. So next month, we'll roll over 1 year. Waiting and waiting and waiting. Just like you guys, right? Come on, admit it. You guys are waiting just like we are. But you can do this. Now, this video is about sponsoring the financial responsibilities to you, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, of sponsoring a prometida, a beneficiary to come to the United States of America. Come on along. Now, explanation para ti. I'll give you an explanation. Now, I live in the panhandle of beautiful Florida, and it's March, so it's warming up, near Pensacola, north of Navarre Beach. And Navarre Beach is where we're going to get married. We're going to marry each other here on the beach, weather permitting. Hopefully it's not pouring with rain or there's no hurricanes attacking us. Okay? And Karina is from Caracas, Venezuela. Beautiful Caracas, Venezuela. Beautiful country. And she lives as a legal resident of Bogota, Colombia. And she is a manager of a couple of cake stores. And she is degreed up, according to the U.S. government, when I got her college degrees adjudicated, in tax accounting. So she likes taxes. Not me. I can't stand it. I don't like paying taxes. Taxes suck. But it's a good degree to have. But this video, ladies and gentlemen, is about your financial responsibility to your beneficiary, Mr. or Miss Sponsor. Okay. Now you can when you adjust your green card, once you get married on the K1 visa within how much time? 90 days. You're right. Then you adjust the status and you fill out a form I-864. So you got married, you're doing the adjustment of status paperwork, and you, Mr. Sponsor, can financially sponsor your new wife or husband from wherever country it is he or she came from by signing and filling out correctly USCIS form I-864, affidavit of support. And this document is legally enforceable. It's a contract between you, Mr. and Miss Sponsor, and Uncle Sam. It's a contract that signifies that you are going to accept responsibility for your new wife or husband from wherever it is she came from. Okay? The beautiful Philippines, Peru, Nigeria, Morocco, Liberia. To our friends in Liberia, we shout out to you. Now, specifically, okay, the sponsor is guaranteeing the U.S. government that your new wife or husband will not become a public charge. So what is a public charge? Is that like a new credit card? No, it's not a new credit card. A public charge means that you Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, will ensure your new husband or wife does not become dependent upon food stamps, Medicaid, SCHIP, SSI, TANF, other government-funded programs that basically help folks who are struggling financially. So if you're going to bring somebody to the United States, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, you have to qualify financially. And if you do not qualify financially, you will not get the visa. Okay? And if you get the visa and you bring your fiance over here and you get married, and then you get a divorce, whatever happens, and then he or she goes on public welfare, guess what? Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, you must repay the U.S. government for any of these benefits received by your beneficiary, even if you're divorced. Seriously, Diego, I hear you saying out there, seriously? So what you're telling me is I get married to my foreign beneficiary and then we get divorced? Isn't that the end of it? No. If you get divorced, Mr. or Miss Sponsor, your beneficiary is still entitled, by virtue of the U.S. government and the contract you sign, that you must take care of her. Even if the judge says, Mr. Sponsor, it was all her fault or his fault, your beneficiary was totally to blame, here's a no-fault divorce, you still must take care of your beneficiary financially, no matter what the judge says. So take it very seriously, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor. When you sign that contract, that form I-864, it is a serious legal obligation to you to take care and protect your fiance once you bring her here and get married or him. Okay? And this responsibility lasts until either your beneficiary becomes a U.S. citizen, he or she becomes a U.S. citizen, then the contract is terminated. She has or he has worked in the United States for 40 Social Security credits, which equates to about 10 years. So he or she has to work for 10 years in the USA, or they go back home to wherever they lived before. So if you marry somebody from, let's say, Holland, and you're married for a year, it doesn't work out, and then he or she returns back to Holland, then the contract is null and void, and you are no longer responsible, Mr. Sponsor, for that person, financially, to the U.S. government. So now you understand why the U.S. government imposes a financial requirement of 125% of the minimum poverty guidelines. So, you know, when you adjust the status, when you get married, you go to the embassy interview, you got to be at 100% of the minimum poverty guidelines, so the federal income requirements. But when you get married and come to the USA, you have to be at 125% of the minimum U.S. poverty guidelines, okay, based upon your household size. Okay, so the household includes you, the sponsor, the beneficiary, and any of her children. So a beneficiary with 2 kids, you'd have a household size of 4. Okay. Now, of course, there is an exception to every rule, and if you are a member of the U.S. Armed Forces on active duty, you are only required to demonstrate a household income that is equal to the U.S. poverty guideline of 100%, okay? But that only applies to your wife or your husband, okay? It doesn't, immediate family members, it doesn't apply to your beneficiary's second cousin, okay, or first aunt or uncle or whatever, wife, husband, or kids. So now you know, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, you have a big responsibility and you have liabilities to financially support your beneficiary, okay? Now, while it may not seem like a big deal to some folks to sponsor somebody and bring them over to the United States, but the Form I-864 is a legally binding contract. It's a now, I'm not an immigration attorney by any means. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a pilot, and I don't play one on TV, okay? I'm a real estate agent with a lot of experience in processing and going through what I'm talking about in this video, okay? So the Form I-864 creates a legally binding contract that could last up to 10 years or until your beneficiary becomes a U.S. citizen or goes back home, okay? Remember, you fill out Form I-864 when you adjust the status to apply for the green card. So let's recap this. Before you agree, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, to financially sponsor an immigrant to the United States, a new husband or wife, consider the following liabilities. Sponsoring an immigrant spouse may not end with a divorce. Okay? If you get divorced and she doesn't leave the country or he doesn't leave the country, as in the United States, or doesn't work or doesn't become a U.S. citizen, it's all on you, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, even in a divorce. Okay? So it's very important that you consider these factors. Now, I'm not saying you guys are going to get a divorce, but no way, Jose, are you guys going to get a divorce. You love each other, you're going to settle down and be together forever, okay? But this is one thing to think about. So let's say that you got married to somebody from whichever country, and then you got divorced a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later. They didn't become a citizen. and you decide you're not going to pay for that person financially, she remarries somebody else, or he remarries somebody else, and is financially doing well. So your beneficiary, you get divorced, and she marries somebody else, and she's got a fantastic new husband making fantastic new money. Guess what? You still have to pay her up to 125% of the poverty guidelines, even if she marries a millionaire and is sitting in a big 12,000-foot mansion on Miami Beach. Doesn't matter. U.S. government doesn't care. Understand? You hearing me, right? Okay. If you don't pay the sponsor, if you don't pay your beneficiary once you get divorced, she or he can sue you for financial support. Even if he or she is a multimillionaire, wins the lottery, doesn't matter. Now, it's a pretty rare occurrence, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for this to happen. Okay? I don't recall ever seeing any beneficiary take his or her sponsor to court. Okay? But if it happens, guess what? the state where he or she lives in is going to side with the federal government, and that means you're going to lose, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor. Even if your ex-wife or husband is now married and living in a different state, making all kinds of money, you're going to still be financially responsible. And the U.S. government, Uncle Sam, can sue you also, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, to recover any program benefit costs like Medicaid. Like if your ex-wife or ex-husband goes on welfare, Medicaid, whatever. The government's going to send you the bill, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor. Okay? And you may find yourself in a civil suit with the U.S. government. So what if you, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, say, okay, well, I'm just going to move. I'm going to sell my house and I'm going to move to a different state. If you move and you do not update your address when you move with the immigration you're running from a financial responsibility to your ex-wife or ex-husband who is a foreign national, okay? If you do not notify immigration will fine you up to $10,000, although they're usually in the range of like $3,000 to $5,000, and you could go to jail. It's a serious matter, ladies and gentlemen. And also don't forget, okay, like I mentioned earlier, you will have a limited ability to sponsor a new person. Your first K-1 visa, crash and burn, and then you divorced, and he or she, your ex-beneficiary, didn't leave the United States, didn't become a citizen, hasn't worked for 10 years. You have to include, if you find a new person, okay, and you file a second K-1 visa, which you're allowed to do, you're allowed up to 2 K-1 visas without a waiver, then you find a second person, you have to include your ex-wife as a dependent upon you, Mr. Sponsor. So let's suppose you met somebody and they have 2 kids, so that means that's 3 people, then you as the sponsor, that's 4 people, then your ex-wife, that's 5 people, then your ex-wife, she brought 2 kids over with her, so that's 7. So when you fill out your I-129F, you have to claim and identify 7 people, even though you've been divorced for 5 or 6 years and they live in a different state and they married somebody else. That's the way it rolls, ladies and gentlemen, unless of course they become citizens or they went back to their home country, or they've been working for over 10 years. So you say to yourself, okay, this is a problem. I'm just going to file for bankruptcy. Forget about it. Okay. Your liability, your responsibility to your ex-wife or ex-husband and his or her kids is not solved or terminated by filing for bankruptcy. Okay. You cannot discharge your financial responsibility or obligation like you can with credit card bills and other debts like your car payment, whatever. You can't do it. Okay? The liability for the immigrant will continue until the contract expires. Okay? 10 years. Or they become a U.S. citizen, or they go back home to their home country. Okay? But there is some good news in this, and that sponsoring an immigrant does not include any liability for the immigrant's personal debts, bills, or money problems. So if your ex-wife goes out and buys a car, she buys a new car and then can't make the payments, it's not your problem, Mr. Sponsor. The U.S. government is only concerned about making sure she lives at or right on or above the federal income poverty level of 125%. If you're a foreign national, ex-husband or ex-wife incurs, substantial medical bills, accumulates debt, has got collection agencies calling her or him, or she or he declares bankruptcy, none of this is going to affect your personal credit or affect your responsibility. Okay? And you can help your ex-wife or ex-husband if they get if they get personal financial problems. Okay? The U.S. government's not going to block you from doing that. But we hope this video was helpful to you guys, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Remember, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, when you bring your beneficiary to the United States with her children, they're your responsibility for at least 10 years after you sign that contract. Okay? And if you get divorced or things don't work out, you're still responsible, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sponsor, Miss Sponsor, unless that person returns back to his or her home country, becomes a U.S. citizen, or works for at least a minimum of 10 years. Hang in there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It's just more education for you. And we are going to hopefully see you soon. We will see you soon with your K-1 visa in your hand. Don't be getting a divorce now. Make sure this is real. Otherwise, it's going to be an expensive mistake. All right. And we will see you soon, very soon, ladies and gentlemen, in the US of A. We can't wait to have you here. We look forward to seeing you arrive and greeting your sponsor at the airport with hugs. But better yet, he or she better be accompanying you back from your home country to the USA. Thanks for watching.
I'll be back.